Typically, when we talk about different training programs or making different strength gains and changes to the body, usually we tend to focus on the large muscle groups, obviously. With men, it seems to be chest. We want to work chest no matter what. Ladies, it typically is glutes, hips, this kind of area. And everybody's focused on abdominals, of course. But usually we're talking about complex or large muscle groups. What if you want to work on your small muscle groups? You want to focus on them, though you don't want to spend a whole day doing nothing but small muscle groups. When can we show love to our small muscle groups without sacrificing our complex movements? Well, there's actually a special technique for doing that. It's been around for quite some time, and it is like a lot of things that we talk about on the show that people have probably heard of and don't know a whole lot about: pre-exhaustion training. Today on the Personal Edge Fitness Podcast.
Welcome to the Personal Edge Fitness Podcast
with Garrett Williamson.
Health, wellness, exercise, nutrition, and a whole lot more. Got questions? Call us and leave a message at 251-278-EDGE or message us at Personal Edge Fitness on Facebook and Instagram, at Team PE on Twitter, or personaledgefitness.com.
Good day and welcome to the Personal Edge Fitness Podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Garrett Williamson. I'm president of Personal Edge Fitness and the host of the show here. As always, I really appreciate you listening in and checking it out. The show's all about dispelling the myths of health, fitness, and wellness. And I come to you today, again, from my favorite spot, as long as the weather's going to hold. I'm out here on my back deck with Dog River in the background. It's a beautiful setting for talking about, actually, one of the favorite little techniques I like to use in training, and I can't believe I haven't done a podcast on it before, and that is pre-exhaustion training. Now, for those of you that may be interested in upcoming shows, because we've been talking about one for the last few weeks, I'll let you know that we actually have a date that we're going to be talking about the creatinine or creatine podcast. We have a guest that's going to be coming on our show. His name is Dr. William Terry. Now, he's actually been on the show before talking about another subject, but Dr. William Terry is with the Connexus Clinic, and actually we have a link, we'll have a link in the comments that you can actually check it out. Dr. Terry will be with us on our next show talking about that and discussing exactly what we talked about when we had some listeners contact us about that particular subject, knowing about creatine, like we take as a supplement, and creatinine levels. And excuse me, I butcher that word every single time. I'm sure Dr. Terry will correct me on it. So anyway, that podcast that we've been talking about for so many weeks is coming up next week. And if you have any questions about this podcast on pre-exhaustion or about that one, or as we are doing for that particular podcast, we took suggestions from listeners. If you have any questions about the show, please contact me at area code 251-278-3343. That's area code 251-278-EDGE. You can also reach out to me at my email address, which is Garrett, Garrett, at personaledgefitness.com. Hit me up on Twitter at TeamPE. You can reach out to us on our website, which is personaledgefitness.com, and that is also our Facebook page. Now, pre-exhaustion. Now, you may have heard of that. If you haven't heard of it, you may have thought the same thing I thought about when I learned of pre-exhaustion. When I was getting my master's degree in 1993, the professor that talked about it, he was our strength and conditioning professor. He really liked this method a lot. And he was an active trainer at the time, was using pre-exhaustion quite a bit. And so I got to learn it from somebody that was not only had studied it quite a bit, had used it a lot and was a big fan of it. And pre-exhaustion is kind of simple. Typically, when we put together a workout program, and if you've trained with us, you know, after a warm-up, we typically start with the largest muscle group that we're going to go after that day. Typically, we start there because we're wanting to focus the large amount of energy. Sorry, there's a plane flying over. That's not our ultralight friend. That is actually a plane flying over. We'll give it a second to leave. We typically start with that larger muscle group because that's what we're going to work on. It's the biggest muscle that we're working on that day, so therefore, it's going to require the most amount of energy. And we want to hit that muscle when you're fresh. Since it's going to require a lot of energy, we don't want you trying to attack that muscle later in the workout when you're a lot more tired. So we typically want to hit it first. And that happens to be our focus. Then we'll hit smaller muscle groups. And usually that big muscle that we're hitting is usually involved in complex movements. For instance, if we're hitting the chest, then we're going to be doing a bench press, or we're going to be doing a dumbbell press. We're going to be push-ups. We're going to be doing presses on the TRX. Any of those exercises, there's a multitude more, but any of those exercises are going to require combination movements. Take the bench press, for example. If you're lying on your back and you're pressing a bar up and down off your chest, well, the chest muscle actually adducts the arm. What does that mean? It brings the arm into the body. Most people think it pushes the arm away. It doesn't. Muscles don't push. And so it doesn't actually push the arm away. It brings the muscle into the body. The muscle that controls the extension of the arm from your elbow down to your hand, making that move away from the body, is actually your tricep. And another muscle that's involved in that bench press movement is the muscle that controls the arm movement from your shoulder to your elbow, which is going to be basically your shoulder. It's going to be your front deltoid, lateral deltoid, even a little bit of your trapezius. So when you're doing a bench press, even though you're adducting the arm, you're working that chest muscle, you've got chest, tricep, and shoulders involved in that particular move. So that's what we call a complex move. There's a lot of muscles helping, even though the big one we're trying to go after happens to be the chest. That's typically how we put together a workout. Complex muscles to simple muscles. But what if the simple muscles are what we want to really focus on? And one of my favorite examples of this is men who want to work biceps. I mean, come on. It's summertime. We want to work, as one of my clients calls, mirror muscles. Sun's out, guns out. We want to work biceps really, really well. But we don't want to miss, when you work biceps, that's a pull, that's what we call the pull side of the body, the back side of the body, even though it's on the front of your arm. As trainers, we look at that as the back side of the body because it is a helper muscle with the back muscle. It's not a helper muscle with the chest muscle. There's actually a funny push-up that trainers do online, and you can tell they don't have any knowledge of physiology or very little of anatomy, and they actually do a push-up where they turn their palms upside down. In other words, turn their palms, forward. Instead of your fingers pointing out away from you, your palm is pointing out away from you. Your fingers are pointing back towards you, and you lower yourself down into a push-up and press and push up out of that, and they call that a bicep exercise. It's ridiculous. That bicep is not pushing whatsoever, so it's not involved in that whatsoever. It is involved in helping with back muscle work, like doing pull-ups, doing lat rows, overhead pull-downs. That bicep is involved with that. That's why we say it's attributed to the back muscle. But let's say instead of working the back muscle, I want to work my back muscle, but that's not really my focus. I really want to work on my bicep. Well, for that type of exercise, that type of program, that type of goal, you're going to use a system known as pre-exhaustion. Now, it doesn't just work for the bicep. That's just a very common muscle group that people want to work in a pre-exhaustion. You can work with any small muscle group, and I'm going to tell you some benefits of using this particular technique. Now, pre-exhaustion actually is just what it sounds like. A very layman's definition of pre-exhaustion is using complex muscles or complex muscle movements to fully exhaust simple muscles or single focus muscles. What I mean by single focus, let me break that down. I've talked about complex muscles versus simple muscles. We also call them primary movers versus secondary movers. But let's go back to our bench press. A bench press, in order to work the chest, it's almost, not completely, but it's almost impossible not to get other muscles involved when you're trying to work the chest. And somebody out there may come up with another example, but probably the closest thing I can think to doing just a pure chest exercises is to take like a resistance ball and like you're trying to hug it like a tree, and you're really pushing in hard. That's going to work most of the chest muscles, and you can keep most of the shoulders, most of the triceps out of it. But typically a bench press, a push-up, a TRX press, a dumbbell press, a decline or incline press, it doesn't matter. You're going to involve multiple muscles in order to fully exhaust that chest muscle. And that's why we call it a complex muscle. A simple muscle, I was using my bicep a minute ago talking about that, but let's go back to the working the chest. Picking a simple muscle or a secondary mover, not the prime mover, which happens to be the chest. A secondary mover in a bench press or a push-up or a TRX press or dumbbell press is going to be your triceps, because they actually extend the arm, they extend the elbow to the hand, they extend that away from the body. Just think about like the tomahawk chop with your arm. That's the tricep. Not pulling it towards you, that's the bicep. Pushing it away from you is the tricep. It's not pushing, your tricep is contracting, therefore it's pulling that elbow towards it and extending that muscle. That's a secondary mover in that complex chest muscle. But if I were just to work tricep, I could pretty well work the tricep without affecting any of the muscle. If you think about it, when you're doing bicep, if you're working bicep curls, unless you're doing them wrong, you can focus strictly just on that bicep and not involve any other muscle outside of maybe the forearm. When you're doing quadriceps, think about leg extensions. You can extend the leg and just fire the quadricep. When you do the glute work, which is a complex muscle, you really can't. You're going to have to, in order to work the glute, you can do some pelvic presses and what have you, but most likely you're going to get hamstrings involved. You're going to get quadriceps involved. You're going to get the entire gluteal group involved. So going back to that secondary mover, which is what we're trying to do with this pre-exhaustion. If I were to want to work the day I came in as using my chest day, and I'm going to work chest, but I really want to focus on my tricep. And it's tricep development, Now, pre-exhaustion really focuses on development. I'll get to strength in a minute, but it's developing that muscle. It's focusing in on that muscle and developing it. And if I want to work my triceps, even though I don't want to miss chest that day, then I will start out by doing a tricep press down, or I'll do skull crushers or headbangers, as we call them. Maybe a dip. It's not a bad idea. There's a lot of chest movement in the dip, but you're going to do something to fully exhaust the tricep. Then you're going to do a workout almost backwards from what we were talking about a minute ago. You're going to work tricep first. Then you're going to turn around and do a complex movement on the chest or even the shoulder if you're going to do an overhead press. But typically, if you're going to work tricep and you want to do a full pre-exhaustion type of workout for a tricep, then you're going to go to that big chest muscle that's been sitting there resting, not doing anything. And your triceps are now worn out. You've hit 3 sets of 10 to 12 exercises on the tricep. And now you're going to go and fully exhaust it by working the chest, which is fresh, but it's going to fully exhaust the tricep by having the tricep try to help the chest muscle. That's a classic pre-exhaustion workout. A lot of people use pre-exhaustion in supersets too. Now, I want to give a breakdown of that. The example I used a minute ago, I was talking about doing 3 sets of triceps. In other words, fully exhausting the tricep, then starting another complex movement in order to finish the tricep. A lot of people in pre-exhaustion like to do it in a giant set. Now, what I mean by a giant set, for those of you who don't know who that is, usually a giant set has 2 exercises that are working together. And they're done, bam, bam, bam. This whole set is done, 1, 2, 3. And a giant set usually consists of more than 2 exercises. Typically 3. In a lot of giant sets that I use, I'll use a giant set where I'm doing an exercise with the muscle, let's say the tricep, and then I go and use the pre-exhaustion method. I'll go do a chest workout immediately. Literally jump off that rope, go straight to the press machine and start doing some bench press or some push-ups immediately. No rest. No, I got to grab some water real quick. I'll be there in just a second. I want ATP is almost completely depleted. I want to go fully depleted. I want to fully break down the muscle. No break, no stop, no pass go. Don't collect $200. And then typically what I like to do is a third exercise unrelated to those 2. Some simple medial glute leg raises. Something that's not a complex muscle, so it's not going to take a lot of energy. We can use that same time to work a muscle, so we're not wasting time, but you're also giving your chest and triceps and really your anaerobic system time to recover. But you don't stop. So a tricep press down, chest work, with some sort of a compound press movement, lateral leg raise, and then go right back to the triceps and do that 3 times without stopping. Those 3 exercises together without stopping is called a giant set. And that's another way that people like to use pre-exhaustion. In their supersets or giant sets, they like to use a primary mover, the muscle that we're trying to really work out, in this scenario, the tricep, and then they go straight to that complex move without resting. Another fantastic use of pre-exhaustion. I just want to give you some other examples really quick of pre-exhaustion. Bodybuilders are very much into pre-exhaustion. This is what I was talking about as far as development of a muscle. Now, like I say, I'm going to get into strength in just a second because there's actually some studies on that. Very popular pre-exhaustion workout for a bodybuilder is quadriceps. Quadriceps are really, really big muscle. In fact, if you looked at them in size, I think they're second only to the glutes. So they're big muscle, but they really are a secondary mover. Why? Because think about it, in a leg extension, you can fire that quadricep without involving any other muscle, just like the bicep, just like the tricep. So it is a secondary mover. But a lot of bodybuilders want to really develop that quadricep. That's a big time mirror muscle. It really is. What they'll do is they'll do a leg press or a leg extension to failure and then finish with like a squat or even a walking lunge. Because now they're breaking down that quadricep, and while the quadricep is tired, they're going and using the glutes, medial glutes, even hamstrings to fully exhaust that muscle. It's actually a very, very effective technique. What happens is the pros and cons of it, or the pros of it, is those secondary movers are getting a lot of work. This is extra credit day for those muscles. And for you folks that are concerned about how a muscle looks, and maybe that's your show muscle, and I get it. Trust me, as I've said many times before, vanity is my favorite sin. I've got them just like everybody else does. I understand. So if that's your show muscle, well then think about using pre-exhaustion. I highly recommend it. Now, like I say, bodybuilders love this, and it's for quote-unquote development. When I say development, think about how it looks. That's what I mean by the word development. When it comes to using strength, which is, of course, the type of development, but I'm just using these 2 words, development to talk about how it looks, and the strength to talk about development of, power and what have you. May of 2003, Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research, is a fantastic journal, actually published a study talking about pre-exhaustion versus post-exhaustion. The traditional way of working out we know of as post-exhaustion. Pre-exhaustion versus post-exhaustion, which one actually gained more strength? And I found this interesting. Just a reminder about how to contact the show before I get to that last point. Please contact us if you're interested in knowing more about this subject. 251-278-3343. That's 251-278-EDGE. You can reach out to me at Garrett at personaledgefitness.com, which is, of course, our Facebook page and our website. And hit me up at Team PE on Twitter if you'd like. But in May of 2003, the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research talked about, and actually published a study, whether or not the strength gains for overall strength. That was interesting. When they were talking in this article, they were talking about overall strength. And I found that, hang on to that thought, because I'm going to come back to it in a second. But they talked about overall strength, and they said for overall strength, post-exhaustion was actually better than pre-exhaustion as far as training for overall strength. It's kind of a case closed type of thing, they said. Pre-exhaustion is great, but if you want overall strength, that post-exhaustion was actually better. When I started looking at the study, and I wanted to know what they meant by overall strength, because that's a very general term, overall strength. So I started looking at it and realized, when they were talking about overall strength, they were talking about full body strength, as in my ability to use all my complex muscles in order to lift something, or my, like a bench press. So my bench press didn't get better because I did a lot of pre-exhaustion work with my triceps. Okay, I get it. I understand that. But think about this. Overall strength, yes, but pre-exhaustion for the strength of a simple muscle. Pre-exhaustion, using that technique as gaining strength for a secondary mover. If I measured the tricep using post-exhaustion techniques versus using pre-exhaustion techniques on the tricep, would the tricep be stronger? I argue that it would, because the study didn't look at that. It looked at just overall strength, and it did not look at the benefits to that secondary mover. So I still use pre-exhaustion quite a bit. I use it a lot when I have people that really have focus areas they want something to focus on, and to change it up a little bit. I also like to use it, and I'm going to caution you about this. I'm cautioning you about doing this yourself, because this is where you really need a professional to work with you, because this is going to be extremely, extremely dangerous. I'm prefacing my statements by telling you, please do not do this. If you're interested in working on this, have this particular concern, and you have an injury that you want to rehab, please contact us at area code 251-278-3343. I'll be glad to help you with that. So please don't take this next step on your own. But if you do have an underdeveloped secondary mover, I've got a swimmer right now that one of their shoulders is a little bit out of whack. We're using pre-exhaustion to get that shoulder back in shape. But the reason I say I caution you using that is the fact that if you've got an injury, and one of the first things you want to do is go do pre-exhaustion, I'm telling you, you're going to re-injure. Absolutely going to re-injure. But if you've got a weakness there and you're working with somebody that actually knows physiology, knows anatomy, knows how to effectively go after that muscle without injuring it, it's a fantastic technique, but only under those circumstances. It's the whole reason why, as you well know, that everybody on staff has at least a bachelor's degree in the field of exercise science, exercise physiology, kinesiology, sport medicine, or athletic training. They don't have all those degrees. They have one of those degrees, if not advanced degrees in it. And this is why. When we get to this much specificity of training, you're going to need this kind of background, that kind of background in order to handle those complex problems. But don't want you to stay away from pre-exhaustion altogether. Fantastic technique. Again, if you're interested in learning more, reach out to me at Garrett at personaledgefitness.com, or that's also our website and our Facebook page. I'd love to hear from you. As always, I'm going to tell everybody it's still a little warm out there. Everybody stay hydrated. And when it gets cold out there, everybody stay hydrated. National Don't Drink Water Day. Everybody stay hydrated. Stay tuned now. Next week, barring any unforeseen disasters, we will be having that podcast. We'll have Dr. William Terry on with us talking about creatinine levels and creatine supplementation and kind of figuring all that out for us. But thank you so much for listening to us today. Thank you so much for taking time to learn about pre-exhaustion. Just one more way we help you reach your level of wellness. Everybody have a great day.
Thanks for listening to the Personal Edge Fitness Podcast with Garrett Williamson. Subscribe now and be a part of the show by calling 251-278-EDGE or message us on Facebook and Instagram at Personal Edge Fitness or at Team PE on Twitter, and visit us at personaledgefitness.com.